In this video, we're going to take a look at the ScoreLab. The ScoreLab is the module that you use to look up the exam results for an exam that you've assigned to your students, whether it was one that you assigned that Prodigy created or an exam that you created yourself using the Exam Composer. It's also where you can do advanced statistical analysis on the exam itself, and we'll get to that in a minute. The list at the top of the screen will show all of the exams that you've assigned to your students. The most recent one that I've assigned is Prodigy Practice Exam 19. If I click it now, it'll say Statistical Analysis will take a moment. Would you like to continue? If I click yes, then it'll pull up the data for any students who have completed that exam. So here in this example, you can see that only one student, me, has taken that one exam. So let's scroll down and find an exam that I know has some data that we can look at. I'm going to click Secure Comprehensive Exam 1, and let's take a look at it. If you look at the list in the middle of the screen here, you'll see a list of all of the students who have completed the exam, their overall score, and their scores in each of the NBCRNA classifications. These scores are a percentage, so they're all out of 100. If you click on a student's name, it will pull up their actual score report, so it'll show what percentage that student got in each category, how much time they spent on average in each question type, and it'll show the actual questions themselves, what the students chose, the correct answer, the citation, the rationale, etc. And from here you can print this report if you like, or we'll close it. And also you can export this list directly to Excel by clicking the Excel export, and it will save the file in the downloads folder of your internet browser. If you want to view the exam key itself for a particular exam, once you've selected it, you can click the exam key button here and it will show all of the questions, the options, the correct answer, the rationale, and the citation for each item. The report in the lower left-hand corner will give us a lot of information, mostly central tendency sort of things, as well as some more information about how the class as a whole did on the exam. So if you look here, the top section shows the average scores, and because this is one of the secure comprehensive exams, that means that every other student in the system has taken the exact same exam, and it can compare your student's performance to everyone else. So if you look, it says your examinees, N equals 15, so we had 15 students who completed this exam. It shows their average overall out of 100 and their standard deviation. And if we scroll down, you'll see that it shows that they're being compared to all students nationally who have completed this same exam. So right now they're being compared to the results of 1,871 other students. If we like, we can change that. So if you see this drop down here says all students, we could change that to say class of 2015, because this is a class of 2015 exam. And now if we scroll down, we'll see that they're being compared to 521 students just from the class of 2015. That way you can compare apples to apples, and you're not necessarily comparing, say, juniors to seniors and so on. If we scroll a little bit further down, we'll see some of the central tendency calculations, the median, mode, range. We'll also see the negative outliers, and we use the lowest 20% of performers on this exam to highlight here. Below that, you'll see the percent of missed questions on the exam by category. So you can tell that the topic that the students had the most trouble with was anesthetic delivery system. So 12, almost 13% of the questions that they missed were from this one category alone, followed by inhalation anesthetics, congenital heart disease, and on down the list. And it will list all of the topics that they were exposed to on this exam. To the right of the exam report is a chart selector, so you can click and choose a couple of different items that you can look at to graph how they compared to the nation in different categories, or how much time they spent answering questions. And again, here you'll see that they're being compared to the class of 2015. This chart is also updated by this selector here that goes from all students to all of the available classes. If you'd like to have a report that you can hand out to your students that will show their score, percentile ranking, that sort of information, then you can click the Student Handouts button here in the panel on the right. So the Student Handout function will create a sheet that you can give to each student that shows their exam, their raw score, and their score in each category, as well as their percentile rank overall and in each category. And this is one way that you can use to give your students feedback a little bit more than just the score without handing them the actual exam key. And we'll come to some of the options later that you can use to determine what information your students get, what feedback they get after they take one of these exams. Below Student Handouts is the Standard Scores button, and if you click it, it will calculate the standardized scores for your students' performance on this particular exam. So here we're looking at the raw scores, but we can convert these scores into T-scores within the cohort, Z-scores within the cohort, or Z-scores within the nation, T-scores within the nation, percentile ranking, and so on. The next button is Variability, and this will calculate all the variability statistics for this exam. So it'll show variance, standard deviation, interquartile ranges, semi-quartile ranges, etc. The next button is Reliability Analysis. And we use both types of reliability calculations. Even odd is the default, so it'll say even odd split, which is comparing the even numbered questions to the odd numbered questions, comparing the student's performance on those. And there's also a top bottom split where you can compare the first half of the exam to the second half of the exam. We also have a split half correlation and a Spearman-Brown correction, which takes each exam out to 170 questions to see if there be any change in the correlation. We also do a KR20 and a KR21 if you're interested in those types of statistics. The next screen is the item analysis screen, and that's what most people would be using more often to examine the performance on individual items on an exam. So you can see it looks something like a spreadsheet. It'll have the individual item number for each question, the question type in this column, so MULT is multiple choice, calc is calculation, hot for hotspot, IMG is image-based, drag would be drag and drop questions. It'll show the correct answer, the number of students who missed this item, the number of students who got it correct, and we also do the point by serial, discrimination index, difficulty index, etc. Basically, what it's going to do is if the students' responses on a particular question were kind of strange, it's going to highlight it in yellow. If they were really strange, it's going to highlight it in red. If I click this yellow highlighted item here, it'll open up the actual question itself. So it'll show me what the question looks like. I can click View Rationale, so I can read the rationale that goes with the question, see the citation, and see if I agree with it. It will also show the students who answered this question correctly and a list of the students who answered it incorrectly. All of the calculations for this particular item will appear here on the right. Questions that have the traditional 4 options, such as multiple choice questions and image-based questions, also come with an interactive split analysis. This allows you to see which students chose which options on that particular question. It also divides the students into 4 quartiles based on their performance on this exam. So quartile 1 is the lowest 25% of performers. Quartile 4 is the highest 25% of performers. And you can click on any one of these cells to pull up a list of the students' names. So let's say I want to click on the D cell to see which students chose option D, and there it'll list all of those students' names. If I click on B, it'll pull the students who chose option B. You can click on any of the cells within the quartile also to see which student in the highest 25% of performers chose option A, and it'll identify that student as well. If we click an item that's red, we can see that no students got this item correct, and that's why this question was marked in red. That's typically going to be, let's look at some of the other ones, an MCR, which is a multiple correct response, or what people refer to as multiple multiples, or a calculation question, because students just have a lower percentage of getting those questions correct. You'll notice there's also a panel here that says filter or refresh data. If students are currently taking an exam and you're wanting to see their results update as they're taking it, you can click this refresh button. If you want to filter exams, so let's say I want to look at only exams that contain the word secure, I can type in the word secure, click filter, and it'll limit our list to exams that have that name. This would also be handy if you name your exams according to the class number, say NUR 650. You could type in NUR 650 here in the list, click refresh, and it would limit your view to just exams for that particular class. I mentioned that you have control over how much feedback students get when they're looking at their exam results from an exam that you've assigned in ProdigyConnect. So I'm going to click the faculty screen to exit out of the ScoreLab, and we're going to look at the options button right here so that we can look at how we can control how much feedback they get. In particular, we're going to look at these first two options right now. The first one says allow students to view details or the exam key of assigned Prodigy exams. The second one says allow students to view details or the exam key for faculty created exams, and those are the exams that you create yourself in the exam composer. If I leave both of these checked, then when students complete an exam, they can go to their exam results screen, they can click on their score, and it will open up the actual exam key. That will show them each question, the correct answer, the answer they chose, the rationale, and the citation. Some schools like for the students to be able to go back and review that material, so they want them to have access to all of that information. If, however, you want to reuse the same exam the next year for a class, you probably don't want this year's class to have a copy of the exam key. In that case, you would simply uncheck these options. That way your students are able to see their overall score in percent, they can see their score in each of the NBCRNA categories, but they're not able to pull up the actual exam key that shows each individual item in the exam. Once you've made your selections, just click Save and Close, and your options